What would Jimmy Buffett do? It is our raw materials wholeness week, the final week of the practice, the final pillar in the entire process. And as timing would have it, Jimmy Buffett died this week. So I sit here today in a t-shirt that has been to many Jimmy Buffett concerts. And not only that, many of the best times in my life have been spent in this t-shirt. And the Chiefs also are getting ready to play. And I thought about that for Wholeness Week, a Patrick Mahomes shirt. And I realized this t-shirt right here is older than Patrick Mahomes. And it was purchased in the mountains in Colorado. And I like the ties to just something bigger, grounded, whole. Anyway, the shirt, Jimmy Buffett, just the entire energy. I brought in just a few things to help me feel whole at a time where wholeness is maybe a little hard to come by, because emotionally I'm stirred. Jimmy Buffett means something to my family, and he might not mean anything to people who don't know his music or haven't heard from him, but this is where wholeness becomes really apparent. For me, Jimmy Buffett explained the philosophy and the values and things like that I wanted to live by. There's actually a quote of his that I feel like belongs on my epitaph if I had one. Read dozens of books about heroes and crooks, and I've learned much from both of their styles. And of course, I've read more than a dozen books, but the meaning of I've learned a lot about the good guys and the bad guys. And since I study people, it makes me whole to hear some Jimmy Buffett talk about, what he had to do in his younger days to survive and compared to the life he lives now. And it seems like as much as he could not lose touch with that reality, he tried to. Obviously, life takes us in a direction that moves us away from circumstances that we may have had in our past. And it's hard to remember them without making efforts to. He wrote songs about them. He gave himself a chance to remember what he felt like when he was younger. As I mentioned, wholeness is our final pillar and the pinnacle of what we're after. Each one of us being able to feel good in our own self, in our own material, in the own raw things that we came in with. And the other two physical weeks, I think it's important to mention here, ignorance and conflict come together to support our wholeness. So if we can tackle our feelings about our own ignorance and understand the levels, understand the complexity of levels at which we don't understand certain things, and then also look to conflict and how we hold it in our bodies, how the things that we don't know actually create dis-ease in our body. They make us uncomfortable. And it takes moving uncomfortable things to create growth. It takes, when things get stuck, roots get tight, you've got to separate them and move things apart so that there's growth. There has to be room for all the nutrients to get through. There has to be room for light for us to be nurtured and grow. So those three pillars, all of the physical pillars, ignorance, conflict, and wholeness, come together to help support our actual individuality as a physical being. Been talking with my family a lot this weekend about just buzzwords and how wholeness is popping up a lot in ads and in headlines and things like that. And several years ago, when we were building this practice around wholeness, that was the idea. And we used to joke wholeness is the goalness, but it really does have an effect when we each start to think of ourselves as whole, when we can look at the raw material that we came in with and see ourselves, being able to be put together by all of our experiences. So even the things that we've been through that are shameful, even our own shameful behaviors, no matter how atrocious or horrible they are, we can make peace with our experiences. We can make peace with our ability to understand, change, grow. That takes breath, that takes water, that takes movement. Also, wholeness. I brought my grandmother's water cup, which is definitely older than the shirt. So, I'm antiquing it up here with my own age. These three things combined are over 100 years old. But I like to bring these elements into wholeness so that I remind myself how many different things go into being me. Water is a big part of keeping us nourished so that our reasoning stays present, so that our brains work, so that our physical body works correctly. And most of us go around without enough water in our daily lives. Even, I try to keep a practice of water, and most days I don't hit the mark totally. There are days when I go over, but I really try to maintain enough water to support whatever I do to harm my body during the week. And I, rely on it for a lot of things that I can't really expect it to do, yet it continues to provide these things for me. And as I get older, I know I'm going to continue to expect that. With water, I help maintain the integrity of my wholeness. I help keep my muscles and my cells doing what they need to do so that I can work with them to support the brain and body and, emotional, spiritual, physical, mental spaces that I occupy. Wholeness is hard to talk about in a short little video because it's everything, literally everything under the sun is wholeness. And when we lean in, I'm going to actually do it. When we lean in to wholeness, we open up the space to not feel negative, to not feel like things are bad, or especially that we are bad. And I think we can learn a lot from Jimmy Buffett in this instance. You don't have to listen to music. You don't have to like the sounds or the steel guitar or the way that the Coral Reefer band plays. You don't have to like any of that. But you could even just read the words and gain something from the perspective. And that perspective was he was out on the water a lot, seeing how big the world is in comparison to himself. And I think that was why he attracted such a wide variety of people to come together and enjoy. And I really don't recall there being a lot of fights at Jimmy Buffett shows. One in particular in Las Vegas, which we won't even talk anymore about. But always the exception that proves the rule, right? I think that Jimmy Buffett overall as a concept makes people drop the things that stress them out and lean into something that feels good, even for a little while. I think he used to say something about giving people a 2-hour vacation. And he always wanted to make sure that that's what he was doing for the people that paid money to come listen to him play. Jimmy Buffett is the same age as my dad, and I could talk about the ties that go back to my dad when he owned a record store, but I won't. I definitely want to talk about the influence, though, that Jimmy had at an early age. As a kid, I imagined getting on stage with him and singing and mouthing the bad words. And when I look back on that, wanting to be a part of what he was doing, I can see I wanted to be a part of that message. I wanted to feel the way that he did, opening up minds and exploring different ways of looking at things and sharing community, building community, and bringing the stories of the communities that he encountered to life so that I could feel those communities. And I just, I think that I really connected to the wholeness of that. And there are so many of his words. I don't know what the song is, but he's talking about singing in Africa. I remember that night in Africa, my daughter and my little guitar, straddling the equator, the king of Zanzibar. Those shy black hidden faces didn't know me from Adam's cat, but the words and the singing and the people in a ring, and the whole night went like that. I don't know what song that's from, but those lyrics stick with me because it didn't matter who he was on the ego level. He was trying to bring a soulfulness through every single thing he did, and he lived that way. And I think from a young age, I was taught to live that way. And because of that, I am here sad that he's gone, but also it's Wholeness Week, and his name and his words are everywhere right now. An entire generation of people who might not have looked at him are now turning around and looking, and it's going to creep into the culture right now. Just this concept of what he put out there and being connected to the ocean, being connected to your moods, being able to be present with exactly who you are. And I think that is the truest embodiment of wholeness that we see in our news right now. Jimmy Buffett's death actually brings us together in ways that I think will continue to ripple and wave for a long time. In my just the limited amount of time I've had to check in on videos and things like that, there are all kinds of tributes up. There are all kinds of moments at shows that people are uploading, and I think there's a treasure trove of things to go look at. I might find myself letting the internet lead me wherever it does, but there's so much to encounter about the connections that exist. I read the tributes, and I was surprised at some of the names that showed up. I'm a Jimmy Buffett fan of his music and lyrics, but I haven't really kept apprised of his life necessarily. I don't keep in touch with, what goes on with him or who he collaborates with, but there are so many people that he's worked with that it was cool to hear them have an experience or a memory about him when I didn't even know that they knew each other, and seeing those connections, seeing him reflected in other people that I respect and care about. Just really great for my own sense of wholeness and for, feeling connected to cool, amazing things in our world. Practice guidance for this week. Take some breaths and give yourself a break. Just relax around all of the things that stress you out. Figure out why they stress you out and see if there's something in breathing that helps you break down the work or make it more simple, something that makes it easier to accept the challenges that go with just being a human being, just being you. Wholeness is all about taking it all in. Under the sun, under the moon, standing at the ocean, letting everything that happens wash through and wash back. And yes, we're going to react. Yes, we're going to feel. Yes, it's sometimes going to be good. And yes, it's sometimes not. The reality is we are experiencing every bit of this, and the experience itself is beautiful if we get out of the way of all of the things that bother and trigger us. It's Wholeness Week. Feel good about you, no matter what you think is wrong with you. As we close out, I want to leave one last Jimmy lyric that came to me right before I started recording this video. It's from his song Jimmy Dreams on Barometer Soup, and it is Jimmy Dreams, he's a child to the end. What a joy when you are your best friend. And I think that is the whole point of wholeness and our raw material, is to get to know yourself in a way that you support yourself beyond anyone else. And in supporting yourself, you are able to support others. Emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically. Until September 23rd, be whole.